general thoughts about the Atlanta student movement, what it was like back then, things that just still resonate with you now about being involved.
Well, the student movement, we found ourselves, our people, in the most deplorable conditions, and we basically lived as slaves, and that we had separate and unequal facilities of separate but unequal city, separate but unequal country, and that we were being lynched, killed, all that was in the back of our mind, like it is now, really, and that we just didn't have the things that we thought we could have as people, and at some point, the young people decided to define the oppressor and oppression, and they went up against it. Now, the condition of our people were poor. Believe it or not, it's probably worse now than it was then, and that we felt that we didn't have the things that we needed as a people. And the young people began to cry out, and when they began to demonstrate, protest, speak out against it, a movement was born out of that. Thanks to people like Ella Baker, a movement was born out of that. And the young people, we said student movement, we have to say student movement. And we say student, we're not just talking about college students, we're talking about junior high school, even elementary school children, high school children, and the youth. And the youth are served as the shock troops of the movement. And they went out and they faced all the odds, from bombs, bullets, dynamite, beating, dogs, and probably the worst forms of brutality that you could ever imagine. But they kept coming and kept coming and kept coming until the day a worldwide movement for freedom is resonating all over the world. We want to be free. And that's basically the student movement, to answer your question.
Okay.
You can look at her when you talk.
Yeah.
All right, not the camera.
Yeah, it's just be comfortable having a conversation with
Yeah.
us.
Okay, otherwise forget you.
Forgive me.
What do you think were some of the challenges back then, getting things started? Because you all, you had the adults that were semi kind of moving in one direction, and you guys decided to do something else.
Well, the students, it was based spontaneous movement, and one day we woke up and there the young people were in the streets, and they were marching, they were demonstrating, they were protesting, they were speaking out, and and they were speaking out against the old system. And when they spoke out against this whole system that existed, they were uncontrollable. And even though those who were going in the back door and thought they had a relationship with white people, a lot of them came and the white man put them up front, tell them to go home, stop, I'm ashamed of y'all, go the other way, or tried to stop it, but it was unstoppable. And that, and matter of fact, it to a point that they called in all the established Uncle Toms or established black people in Atlanta, and took them in the back doors, and many of them did everything to try to slow it down, cool it down, and they even went as far as pushing Dr. King to make an agreement that he would not do nothing to disturb the status quo in Atlanta, even though he would go other places in the areas, but he wouldn't do nothing in Atlanta. And that when he'd made that agreement, but the young people made no agreements, and that's why you had a movement in Atlanta, because of the young movement that came off the campuses and what have you, and this movement was uncontrollable by the bourgeois, so they called the young people uncontrollable, I guess extremists and other names, and that. But the movement kept going, and so you have a movement independent of the power structure and independent of what existed in the relationship that black people had before, and we rejected that. And that's how the freedom movement got its independence and got its voice and created young, oh, sorry about that. Oh. Just reach in that pocket and now cut it off. Oh. Yeah.
What was it for you personally? What was the incident, the feeling, the whatever it was that made you say, I have to do this?
Well, for me, I don't know. I was just a street kid, street brother, and had rejected the system, the schools, and all of that. And I had relationship with students. I went on the campus, even though high school campuses, and I stayed on the campus a lot. Even though I had quit school in 7th grade, I roamed the halls and the streets and what have you. And so I was a brother out of the pool hall, and that's where I basically got my information, education, a relationship to the community and the streets. And then I went to the schools hanging out, and a movement had jumped off around the country, a spontaneous movement had jumped off around the country where students were demonstrating and protesting and saying no to a system. And then when the Freedom Riders jumped off, then many of us wanted somebody to suggest, oh, we ought to go join them. And that was the first time it clicked to me. And then, but that spontaneous movement hit the city. I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And when the spontaneous movement hit the city there, my twin sister who was a student, and all of them was involved in it. So when everybody else came out to demonstrate, I jumped in the demonstrations, and then I found myself fighting in the streets, breaking windows, and matter of fact, the first rebellion in the civil rights movement, so-called riot rebellion, was in Chattanooga. I was the one out there breaking windows and hitting white folks upside the head, fighting back, and what have you. And Dr. King and C.T. Vivian and NAACP people, they all rushed to us to try to cool us down, and they rushed to us, and I was totally involved in that area. And then when I was totally involved, I worked with CT. CT was a pastor there, and so he got involved with us. And by me being, anyway, CT, he told me that another group was being formed called SNCC, and CT told Martin, and Martin said that they need to get me out of there, but I was too militant to be a part of SCLC, and they called the young people that was being formed in SNCC, and I became a part of SNCC. And my first assignment was here in Atlanta for demonstrations and protests here, so I came and joined Julian Bond and all the kids off the AU Center and what have you, and we had a SNCC office, 360 Nelson Street, and I got involved with them, and then I began to get assignments. But it was just so spontaneous that we found ourselves out there, and then from that spontaneous going in the back door, not being able to, the demonstrations saying the sit-in movement, we had to go in back doors, say yes sir to white people. Then that brought up the whole situation that we found, not just ourselves in protesting against, but the fact that we couldn't have certain jobs that were white jobs, black jobs. You could do the same thing a white person got, but you couldn't get the same salary. You could go to court. One young man got killed in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I was, and when he got killed, went to court. They said if this nigga had ran, he wouldn't have got killed and sent the white boy home. And those kinds of things. So you couldn't go to court and call a white man a liar, even if he rape you, kill you. It was just open injustice like it is now. And that from that, the work, the jobs, the conditions, all that came up from the city and movement, this whole situation that we found ourselves in. We began to expose it, and that we began to expose the fact that they paid the white community but didn't pay black streets. The schools were separate and unequal. They put thousands of dollars in the white schools, and we got the books after white people got them. So we began to expose the whole relationship that we had with the whole system. So the city and movement opened up the whole can of worms that black people found themselves in this country, and the total injustice that we found ourselves in. Like, for example, none of us could be related or called Mr. or Miss when they had a telephone book. They had, if it was two Mary Jones, one white and one black, they have a Mary Jones and a Miss Mary Jones. And you know, the Miss Mary Jones was always white. And then when they paved the streets, Dr. King used to like to say, where the pavement ends, the black community begins. And that's how you could find a black community, just drive until you didn't see no pavement. And so we work on jobs less, it's just very difficult. And that black people being lynched, killed, and wasn't nothing done about it. And so when the city had movement, it began to talk about our total condition, and that's what we see and know today. And anyway, from that city movement, it was spontaneous everywhere here in Atlanta. Everywhere, students were going to the streets. And then there was a lady named Ella Baker. She told Martin, and she had worked in Montgomery, and she had went around for lynching and traveled all everywhere. And she had told Martin when he was in Montgomery that he, Abernathy, and Wyatt T, you need a staff. Ella Baker, you need a staff, Martin. You call yourself a third, Abernathy, Wyatt, and you. That's not an organization. You need an organization. You need a staff. And she came here and went in the office and pulled them together, and she built Martin King's office there for him. And then in the height of the city movement, she told the students, y'all need to get organized. And she organized Martin to finance it and help finance it. And Martin, and we had a meeting at Shaw University where Martin paid for it, and Martin came. He wanted the young people to be his youth group. And when the young people came to be his youth, came there, he had admiration to have a youth group, and it was Ella Baker who had pulled everybody together. And then as she organized, helped put us together, Ella Baker said to everybody that y'all don't need to be under these preachers. You young people need your own autonomy. And from that, we decided to form the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Students, because she was a student, most everybody was students. You had a few people that was, had dropped out of school, high school students or whatever, and you had total dropout like me, 7th grade. And then students, and you were going to use nonviolent tactics, and you were going to coordinate what you do, Student Nonviolent Coordinating, and use an organization, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So that's how the name and all that came. And then from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, everybody came together, and then we decided to go and coordinate what we would do. And now you have students that was demonstrating and protesting. Now you have these same students coordinating their activities. And that when one go out and protest and demonstrate, then they send the word out. This is what we did, and we went to the movement, we stood in front of the movement, and this is what happened. And then we had somebody said, we sit in over here, this what happened. Then somebody said, we went and jumped in the white folks swimming pool, and this what happened. Then that they drowned us, they did this, that's too dangerous, and whatever. But we continued to coordinate what we were doing. And then one of the other things that SNCC did, young people as they got organized, they sent people went back to their areas, but then because students demonstrated in protests, the schools, especially state schools, were controlled by the governor, by the government. And so many people were put out of school, and they were expelled from school, like Bernice Reagan knows in Albany, Georgia, when they went down to the white bus station in Harlem, in Albany. When they went down to the white bus station, they were expelled from school, put in jail, and then the president and all of them were so scared of white power structure, they put the kids out of school. And they did that around the country. When they put the kids out of school, then the young people say, good, then we'll be full-time organizers, full-time freedom fighters. And that's how SNCC got its staff, mostly from people that were expelled from school, and had quit school, like Julian Bond and John Lewis, all of them. And so that's how SNCC got its staff. We began to coordinate our activities, and then SNCC sent people to different areas. We continuing to protest and march in the cities, but at the same time, we went to extreme rural areas where you didn't have those kind of places to demonstrate in, and you have found another kind of people, and people working in the farm and in the fields. And now you have people, actually slaves, working in the field, sharecropping. Otherwise, you work all year and don't even get a share hardly, and absolutely have no rights. You had to say yes to the white people at all times. You had to go in the back doors, well, that was everywhere, go in the back doors and just be a slave. And SNCC now have people going on plantations and going out there talking to people, and just by talking to people, it was very fearful. And we went out there and started doing that. Not only was they putting dogs and using vicious tactics on the students in Nashville, in Atlanta, in Birmingham, and other places, and now you're in the field where they're throwing dynamite. They're throwing dynamite in the cities also, like in Birmingham and other places too, and threatening death and jails and all kind of dogs and all kinds of things. And now you're in areas where they were assassinating people for telling people to. Well, one group inside of the student movement said, look, we need to, the same white man that's been beating us and killing us and attacking us, we need to vote these people out of office. And they said, well, we need to register people to vote, and well, we can get these people out of office. And then one group, they agreed with that. Bob Moses and other SNCC people, they agreed with that. And then the other group said, hell no, fuck some voting. We need to keep the attack on these white folks. Keep them going, protesting, going to jails, facing their dogs, facing their bombs, but keep it going. And then there was a split in SNCC. The protesters, and then the people going into the fields and work out there in the fields and talk to people about freedom and let them know they were slaves. And when they went out there in them fields, they began to talk to people and saw real slavery in it. One group felt that the group that was going out there in the field talking about some voter registration, he was like Tom, and they backing out of the confrontation. But when we got there in the fields and started talking to people about freedom, we found people that wanted to be free. And when they went out there and started talking to people, people started coming out and speaking out. And you had hidden freedom fighters laying back and stepping up, like Charlie McParker in Poplarsville, Mississippi. So I'll go register to vote, and went to the courthouse. And when he went to the courthouse, the county commissioner came out with a rifle and shot him in the head. Went in the fields and started talking to people, and people speaking another language, and the northern people were saying register to vote. And the people in the South, Miss Hamer, them, they didn't know the word register. They were saying reddish. We're reddish and what have you. And they went to reddish, and when they went to reddish, they faced violence and bombings and attacks. Miss Hamer, they put her in jail and they beat her till she said her body was hard all over her and June Johnson. And one little girl used to hang around here, Miss Arnell Palmer, and she was a young girl, and they beat her so bad that you could always see psychological things that she had went through, and she's the sweetest woman you ever want to see. And then June Johnson and what have you. But Miss Hamer, when they beat her and jailed her and dogged her, and the white man came and told her that you can't register, you do that, you gotta get off this plantation. She said, I get off the plantation. But when they beat her and tried to put fear in her, she came out of the jails and prisons, and it was the difference. You had a lady like Ella Baker, and Ella Baker was like on the mountain. She was knowledgeable and well experienced and intellectually in that term. But then Miss Hamer was probably couldn't read and write, just a common person. Most of us couldn't read and write. And that she was just a common African person. And Miss Hamer came out the field, and it was like, just think if you could see a person that was on fire. If a person ran in here, stood there, and you could see them burning. And you said, oh, I see somebody burning. And you began to describe them burning and telling what you saw. And it would be deep and strong. That's what Miss Baker was doing. But then Miss Hamer was on fire. And when she described her burning and her on fire, she was way more exciting than Julian, Foreman, or King, or Ella Baker, than anybody. Could nobody tell it like Ella Baker could tell it. I mean, like Miss Baker could tell it, but like Fannie Lou Hamer. It was so exciting, and you could feel it, and you could feel the fire burning. And Miss Hamer came out to jail singing, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere that freedom is coming. So then many people, Miss Hamer, but then there were many Miss Hamers and unnamed Miss Hamers all over the South, and unnamed Ella Bakers rising up, and freedom fighters rising up with a voice. And so now SNCC had two staffs. SNCC, the young people, let's go back to SNCC. When SNCC sent people to the South and sent people to an area, we didn't send them there as leaders. We sent them as organizers. And now the difference in organizing, when we sent people to Albany, to the different areas, you had to go and organize a movement. You had to go in. The first thing that Foreman said to me years ago, that the first thing a freedom fighter want to do, he got to find two things for survival. You got to find somewhere to lay your head, sleep, somebody's floor, somebody's couch, and sometimes I've had to sleep in the basement of a church that didn't have no development, just dirt on the floor. But we crawl in there and go to sleep, and then go out in the day and talk about freedom until we find somebody that would support us and say, we agree with you, or give us a meal. So two things you have to always do is always have somewhere to eat, somewhere to sleep. And then the third place, you gotta find people that was willing to protect you. Because when them white folks come to kill you and they hear you in town and hear you speaking up, they were definitely coming at you. And there were many times, all them black folks in the areas all down through the South, for many of us would be dead if them people had, brothers and sisters hadn't came out with their shotguns and put themselves on the front line to fight or die to defend us. And many people did that.
Now, let me ask you, did you actually participate in the Freedom Riders? Did you go on the buses?
I met the Freedom Riders, but I wasn't a Freedom Rider.
Okay.
And I didn't become the Freedom Rider. At that point, we were fighting in hundreds of different areas, And then we began to come together, and SNCC brought all us together, and we were all having different experience, and so therefore I was not a freedom rider.
Okay. Did you, I know that several of these markers deal with historical points where student-led protests sparked, marches and things of that nature. The quadrangle back in May of 1960, the students went on Clark Atlanta campus.
Campus in Morristown.
Yes. Were you involved in that?
I was in Atlanta. I marched in Tennessee, Chattanooga.
Okay.
And I joined the movement down here probably 62.
62, okay. And any involvement with the Atlanta Inquirer and just the importance of what the Atlanta Inquirer meant to SNCC?
No, I didn't know the Atlanta Inquirer. I know it and knew it was a newspaper. I just took it for granted. But you had the Atlanta Voice, and also that was a major black newspaper here in the city that played a major role also. But you had back then, the only news that you had that spoke positive about a movement would be the black newspapers, and that we had them all over the South and all over the country. So when you talk about the Atlanta Inquirer, you're really talking about all the black newspapers that existed all across the South, because that's the only voice that we would have that would speak positive about our movement.
Of your time in the city of Atlanta working with the student movement, what are some of the key things that still kind of resonate with your spirit now in dealing, whether it's having met someone that has had a lifelong impact on you, or a situation that you encountered that was just kind of stuck with you?
Well, I encountered many situations here in the movement. We had demonstrations downtown Atlanta, at Richards, Libs, and what have you, the Hull House, and others. As a matter of fact, the Peachtree Manor Hotel. And one of the things that helped internationalize the student movement was when the Mau Mau's in Kenya. They were known for fighting. They had guerrilla warfare. They were fighting the British. They were people were dying. Colonial forces were being fought and killed. The Mau Mau's had a reputation of cutting the white man's head off or whatever. But they fought a battle in Kenya, and they won their independence. And then, after they won their independence, the prime minister came through Atlanta, and at that time, he stayed at the Peachtree Manor Hotel. At that time, black people born in Atlanta, so-called black people, could not stay in a white hotel downtown. But if you were African and diplomatic African, you stayed at the Peachtree Manor. That's where he stayed. And he was an African diplomat. And when SNCC found out that he was here, we took a demonstration downtown to him. And we went down there and we demonstrated in front of the hotel. And the prime minister came out. His name was Odinga Oginga. And when Odinga Oginga came out, the SNCC linked our movement with the liberation movement in Africa. And matter of fact, some of the SNCC people, Stanley Wise and those, went down there and walked to the hotel and started speaking like an African, whatever they're saying. And anyway, white folks didn't know how to deal with them, but anyway, the prime minister came out and praised us and protested with us, and we wrote a song called "We Went Down to the Peachtree Manor to see Odinga Oginga. The police asked us, what's the matter? We want to see Odinga Oginga. Ooh, ooh, hooroo. Ooh, ooh, hooroo." And uhuru means freedom. And we began to say uhuru in our movement, and sasa. And went back Matter of fact, going back to the March on Washington, SNCC put a sign in the march that said "Freedom Now," and some of the established folks said, "Don't use now, that's too militant," and we put it there anyway. But we said "Uhuru Sasa" means freedom now, and that was one of the early times we linked our movement up with that movement in Africa, which led to having a relationship with Nelson Mandela. SNCC was the first group to go to jail for fighting for Mandela. We went to jail and went to the South African embassy in the United Nations and SNCC people there, and we went there to protest, but when the South African government, they got nasty with us, we had to, put some knuckles on their heads, and we did that. So our movement became internationalized and what have you also.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the protests that took place in an effort to help desegregate municipal facilities. Also, a lot of the stores and restaurants and hotels as well. How important were those marches to moving things forward in the movement?
Well, the march and demonstrating and protesting the disorder we caused, and it forced them to open the door. We boycotted them. We ran them out of business. They were scared that some places got burned down, and they were afraid that the nonviolent movement would lead to all kinds of other things. So every door that's open, every black man that go in a front door, every black person that sit on the front of the bus, everybody that's sitting out there in one of those white colleges or universities or getting jobs down here. Matter of fact, when they kicked Julian Barnes out of office here in Georgia for supporting SNCC and its international positions, we brought a demonstration right here to City Hall when we left the Capitol demonstrating, and our slogan was, "You can do it, Julian Bond, you can do it." And that's what we were saying at the Capitol. And then we were so enthusiastic from that demonstration, we left the Capitol after the demonstration, walking down the street, and guess what we passed by? City Hall. And we went in City Hall and just started taking over. "You can do it, Julian Bond, you can do it." And that was, and then we saw that City Hall had a cafeteria, all white. We went in there and started demonstrating. Matter of fact, we had a demonstration at City Hall and forced them to integrate the cafeteria right here in City Hall. So for every black person sitting in office, matter of fact, it was SNCC that exposed the lie that they were covering up that we were majority in Atlanta. And that's when we ran Julian Bond and 4 or 5 other young people for office, and that's when Maynard and those popped up and said they wanted to run too, but SNCC opened that door too. So every aspect of any progress or any black person or Herman Russell or all these kind of people, SNCC and the city and movement made it. So it covers everything, every aspect, contract compliance. We forced them to say we're gonna add black folks to your contracts. We open all the doors. And so there's nothing that's untapped by what the students did here in Atlanta. Matter of fact, we had major rebellions that some of this stuff led to all kind of other rebellions because we were attacked by the police and all that. And you have to look at the Summer Hill rebellions. You have to look at the Dixie Hill rebellion. You have to look at the Boulevard rebellions right here in Atlanta. And downtown we had rebellions. I remember we at some store, one of the stores down there, we had a little demonstration down there and whatever. I remember the police putting me in the car, putting guns to my head, and anyway, rebellion started and people throwing bricks at them for what they were doing to me. And the man had a gun in my head, said, "Tam, one nigga hit me in a brick, I'm blowing your head off," and whatever. But all of it, matter of fact, black police, matter of fact, we demonstrated, student movement, Dick Gregory and myself and Foreman and I think Julian, with SNCC people, demonstrated that black police be able to ride in police cars. We demonstrated that black police be able to arrest white people and whatever and whatever. We demonstrated that we be able to have rank in the police department, on the fire department, or get in the fire department. We open up all them doors. So every door that's open comes from the bloodshed and the struggle of the students.
Okay. How important was it for the city to open the doors of grading and make sure that health care for African Americans was at least of the same caliber or moving towards having similar health care that was provided for whites?
Well, remember up until, I mean, we still don't have all the graded medicine now. You know, it still ain't as graded what it ought to be and all that. But, matter of fact, back in 1972, April 27, you had Southwest Hospital out there that was owned by Holy Family, a Catholic hospital that had a hospital where they had black doctors couldn't practice in it, black nurses couldn't be equal or go up as high as the white nurses, couldn't head no station and all that, and they protested against that. The black nurses did, Hosea Williams and Boone and those helped the protest go, and Arthur Langford, and I went there to help them, to tell them that these white folks are dangerous. Y'all out here with a protest and talking about these white folks and got a tent sit on these white folks' property, and they dangerous. Y'all better get some guns. They coming. And I was out there, and they were telling me we got to be nonviolent, whatever. And right in the middle of me standing there telling them, I heard a bang, bang. And Officer Langford, I remember his eyes bucked, and the second bullet hit him, and then the next bullet hit me. But it was exposed that the hospital was like that. And then when they picked us up, we shot, and they carried us to, we were hurt. They took us to the funeral home for dead. And then Willie Watkins, who went in the funeral home, they carried us in there, and we lay in there, and then we started moving, and it scared him to death, the funeral home man. He jumped up and grabbed us and threw us in the ambulance and drove us to Grady. And when it came to Grady, they brought us in here and did their little operation, whatever. And then the black doctors in the city wanted to come into Grady and check us out. They couldn't practice in Grady. And the shooting of us at Holy Family Hospital is what led to the black doctors being able to practice medicine in Grady. And so we integrated. When Grady integrated, we integrated the state of Georgia system from getting shot at Holy Family 1972, April 27th. So all of that led to it too. We made them put equal laws and all those kinds of things, even though it still don't go by them, but we made them put that stuff on the book, and everything went to the books, came from the blood of our people.
Okay. If you had to just name one aspect of the movement that has resonated with you the most, what would it be?
One?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There's so many. I went through probably 1,000 situations. I don't know if one would be greater.
Okay, your top three.
Hmm?
Your top three.
Well, just knowing and seeing young people, young girls, and high school students, and they were just so heroic, what we call local people. And they became so, and the boys and girls, they were so heroic that in SNCC, because SNCC had two staff. We had the SNCC staff, and then we created the local people staff. And the local people were so intelligent and so heroic that you could never begin to imagine how intelligent it was and how much of a contribution they made. So I still have so much respect and honor for the unnamed hundreds of people that faced the dogs, the bombs, and went to jail and was beat down and what have you, these young people. I still have the honor and see them as gods and warriors and great freedom fighters equal to everybody on this earth, equal to Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer. There were hundreds of Fannie Lou Hamers, young and old. There were hundreds of Julians and Foremans and Kings and warriors that could tell it. They did work daily day, the same thing that a king, Julian, Foreman, or the rest of us did, but it's local people, and that you had these young kids that, and we had the mothers that we have to honor for these women that gave their children to the movement. The women sent their children out to fight. And if it had not been for the women in Montgomery or the women throughout the civil rights movement, then the movement wouldn't have had staff or freedom fighters. It was the women and the mothers and who sent their children to King or fed their children to SNCC to face bombs, dogs, and all that. And it was the women that would look after us, would feed us, and give us a place to stay. And it was the women that would tell their husband, they said in the mass meeting, they would stand up and say, if these men don't demonstrate with Martin King, if they don't demonstrate in the movement, if they don't protest, if they don't be out there marching, we gonna go tell them that you ain't sleeping with them tonight. They gotta sleep by themselves. And then women would rise up, and then the next day I'd be full of men and full of everybody. But the women fed the movement. The women were the strongest aspect, and we began to see that if you're gonna have a movement, you gotta have women. If the women gonna be, and the women were more militant. Anytime the demonstration was full of women, they were more women. Women wouldn't back down at all. They don't care what the white man brought out there, dogs, bombs, dynamite, the women would keep coming. So the women were strong. If it hadn't been for Ella Baker, it wouldn't have been a SNCC. If it hadn't been for Rosa Parks, it wouldn't have been a Martin King. And so when you look at the women, they played a major role. And so my honor is to all the women of the movement. I honor them for their children and for healing our wounds. And sometimes they would beat us down, they would dog us, they would bomb us, and we faced demonstration after demonstration, and looked like the girls or the women would take us and banish us or hug us or love us in different ways that we would the next day with bandage, with jails, with wounds, we'd be out there fighting again. So the women were our spirit, our gods. So anywhere in the world there's a great movement, you got to have great women, and the women got to play an equal or greater role than that of the man. And so I honor the women of the movement, I honor the children of the movement. And so I don't know how to answer that question, but so many people played a role in that I was able to serve under all of them. I never saw myself as being equal to nobody in the movement. I was always a servant, and I always served the young kids, served the old folks, and served everybody. And so I just see so many people that were so heroic, from Dr. King to Julian to CT, to C.B. King, to Reverend Samuel Wells, to James Bonds, to it's so many, 99% plus 99 is just unnamed. But my whole life since I joined the movement has been a movement of just seeing the people of service and the people who are willing to fight to open the doors, and knowing or not even being concerned about going in it themselves. And many, many people who fought and died, and the number one who fought and died, many of them are dying and can't even afford a headstone on their grave, and many can't even afford a coffin. And that they opened the doors for all these people to be in here, but I think don't too many people know how they got in here. So I don't know how to answer that question.
you like to add anything?
Black power.
All right.
Biggest folks that ever get in the movement, these goddamn politicians.
Yeah.
They ain't got a damn thing. They weak. From Obama on down, Obama ain't nothing but a white folks nigga, just like all the rest of them. And Hillary Clinton ain't nothing but a crook, just like Donald Trump. So until we have our own nation, have our own army, and be able to stand like the Chinese stand and say, this is the Chinese nation, the Koreans saying, this is the Korean nation, the Vietnamese saying, this is the Vietnam nation, this is what we represent. And anybody touch a Vietnamese anywhere in the world, you got to deal with this government. And until we're able to say that all over the world, this is the African. If you kill a Trayvon, you got to deal with Africa. If you choke one of our brothers to death, you got to deal with Africa. And somebody got to say how you treating our people. And everybody else, if you touch anybody else, Irishman, anybody else, then if they die in the streets or being shot or whatever, certain conditions, they got to answer to the governments of that country where these people come from. And they bring us over here and tell us we the white man's slaves. So only somebody, when they kill us, only somebody they answer to is the white folk themselves. And they don't do a damn thing to each other for killing us and murdering us. And matter of fact, they, all that shit just go. And that we need our own army, our own government. And even though we got black folks in city halls and all this kind of stuff, our people are more hungry today than they ever was in the history of our people. You know that?
So, Mr. McCoskey, you don't know who took this?
Bob Finch, I think. Finch.
Is he local?
Oh no, he was a photographer for the movement, and then so and he worked in the movement.